What a wild day we had in South Dakota in the high plains on Sunday. Storm trackers were out, including our very own Brandon Kopic. He had to throw his SUV in reverse, driving away from the tornado. This was near Watertown. It's along the I-29 corridor in the eastern part of the state. South Dakota is yet again in the bullseye for that severe weather. The greatest threat that we have going to materialize later this afternoon for eastern South Dakota. But to briefly touch on what we dealt with yesterday, a handful of reports, and a few of those were tornado reports. Not really a day where we saw the tornado potential maximized, but certainly that materialized. And a couple of the reports, one that we have in western central parts of Minnesota, and then of course near Watertown in the northeastern part of the state. It's this zone where we also had some wild winds. In fact, some destructive winds that were reported. Watertown Airport, a 71-mile-per-hour wind gust. We had in Clear Lake a 71-mile-per-hour wind gust. Even closer to Minneapolis in St. Paul, 66 miles an hour. Not technically a derecho, what we had moved through yesterday, but today could be a totally different story, right?
Yeah, I mean, we still could have the intense winds, if not stronger than what we saw yesterday, and it could cover a much larger area. Storm Prediction Center alluding to that, working with the local offices in South Dakota, in Minnesota, and looking at what's going to play out for tonight. The good news is some power is back on. Before we lose power again, potentially tonight, especially for western Minnesota.
It's really just to highlight where we had those storms, and even hard to see because when you look at the number of people or, customers without power, we're less than 5%. So that gray is less than 5%, then between 5 and 10% we have it. But around Minneapolis, around St. Paul, St. Cloud, that's where we'll be dealing with later today. Where are the storms now? So they've been briefly severe. We've not seen persistent severe thunderstorm warnings, but there have been a couple of storms that have dove in from Iowa, northern Missouri into Illinois, that severe potential there. The storms, though, for the most part, have been weakening. What's got my attention is what's just south of the border, moving out of Montana and now into western North Dakota this morning. And
we've had a warning, generally so attached to at least part of this complex throughout the morning so far. A lot of lightning, so just a signal of how dynamic the atmosphere even is at this early hour before the sun is even up. That considerable threat, you have large hail, very large hail that's included in this, as well as that 60-mile-per-hour wind.
Actually, the reason why we've got that considerable tag is because of the hail. Yeah, we're nearing a tennis ball size hail, or at the very least, egg size hail, golf ball right now. So the front that actually, when we look at this week, I've been toying with the idea, do we call it a taste of fall? Do we call it, it's going to be some of the most refreshing air that we have seen so far this summer. It's something to look forward to, but today is going to be a pretty nasty day, and we are going to have to pay attention to what happens in South Dakota, in Watertown again, because this upgrade that we got from the Storm Prediction Center is specifically because of the winds, the threat that we have for very strong destructive winds, even a little bit of shear too. So with a line of storms, which we're already starting to see some of that energy move through western North Dakota, as it taps into this crazy environment with ridiculous amounts of potential energy, that CAPE, as we call it, available storm energy, we could have a really nasty cluster of storms on our hands.
I mean, Watertown coming back from scenes like you see here in the lower left, there is the risk for tornadoes, especially early development of these storms where you get more of these individual cells, and then it looks like they'll congeal a little bit more. And then as it becomes a bigger complex, you start to really increase the chance for having damaging, intense winds, which is why we're looking at the derecho potential as everything is expected to come together. So South Dakota, Watertown, and even getting pretty close to the Twin Cities.
Yeah, very close. From a potential of seeing those winds, I mean, they could be damaging. We could still be dealing with some severe weather. I know a lot of times these features of severe weather, it's what we're showing you right now, is that tornado. But don't let your guard down from a wind threat, because the destructive winds today could very well do damage just like tornadoes do, because of how strong they are, and also the footprint that a lot of times these derechos, if that's what we end up getting, what these windstorms can bring, it's a much wider path of damage. The tornado threat we will keep in the purview and focus. That does include the I-29 corridor, essentially through the entire state of South Dakota, Watertown included down to Sioux Falls. So it's not zero, but how it's going to play out, We've already seen the storms develop, so
Yeah.
maybe this forecast model a little delayed in the actual initiation. So with the storms already going, watch as they just blossom. They tap into that environment that's just very, very unstable.
That's over Watertown in that general vicinity heading in through Minnesota. And I guess the other part of this is that it would be late night tonight, maybe into tomorrow morning. So you get this overnight threat, knowing how to get alerts to your phone. As you mentioned, these intense winds, trees near your home, interior room if you can do that. Be careful, watch for those alerts.